One of the people who has really come out strongly against you is Edward-Isaac Dovere. He dedicated a whole chapter in his new book to you, Battle for the Soul, and he also has been pretty relentless going after you on Twitter for the past year. What has been really the most offensive or most disgusting thing that he's said about you over the past year?
He didn't say it, but it was in a thread and he liked it. But someone called me a Russian whore that made all my money off my back. And these were all DNC, trolls and whatever. And they would talk about things they would do to me and who I was, and just, horrible things, use swear words and slut, whore, you name it, fucking liar, whatever. And he participated in that. He and Richard Painter was another one. And that started actually 2 years ago in 2019. My story, when I came forward, was printed originally in the Union, which was a local paper in Grass Valley, California. And I, at that point, had come forward with part of the history, right, with the other seven women, I was the eighth. And that story had not even released in the paper yet. It was just online, I guess, for 2 hours. Richard Painter and Edward-Isaac Dovere were already smearing me. So when I spoke with Lisa Lair from the New York Times, the reporter that worked on my story, she said, well, Edward-Isaac Dovere works for the Atlantic. He says you're a Russian asset. And I said, that's ridiculous. I said, where does that come from? But it was just a switch and bait, right? And it's like what they did to Tulsi Gabbard. It's like what they did to any single person that disagrees with them or uses the catchphrase, get us out of these endless wars. That's a catchphrase to get you in trouble. Who knew that you become a radical or a dissident by just preaching peace, by preaching cooperation with other nations? And who knew by coming forward about sexual assault and sexual harassment that you would become that makes you a dissident? So yeah, there was that time that happened. And that day that he did all that activity of calling me a Russian asset, that night I got my first death threat. And it was from some random but they said, hey, we know your address. We're coming to your house. We're going to kill you. And I had to report it to federal law enforcement. It continued. It got really bad as the year progressed. So he was, kind of back behind the scenes in that. And then, he wrote this book. So if you want me to, I will go into, the two major lies in that book.
Yeah, what were they?
Well, the first one was this conspiracy theory. He didn't mention the Russian thing so much. He just kind of printed my affinity to Putin, all right? And some of that was out of context. It was from a novel, which I think I told you about, The Last Snow Tiger, which will be coming out soon. He referenced the tiger pictures, which was weird. Those were paintings done by my mother. So I don't know. I didn't really understand the context of what he was trying to say, but he was basically just implying that affinity that I had for Russian leadership. Then he goes on in the book to say that the fact that I was, my whole history with Joe Biden was actually more of a Bernie conspiracy. And that's what he alleges, that somehow David Sirota had perpetrated this. And I've never met him. And I just want to shout from the rooftops, I'm not a conspiracy theory, not Russian, not Republican, and not a Bernie one. And so it's ironic when he kept saying my story changed, because it was always the same. I just withheld details. His story has changed. He's gone from calling me a Russian asset to a Republican Trump kind of, that thing, to then this Bernie conspiracy theory. And that's why, they had to fight so hard, and, that this was all being pushed by David Sirota. Well, I know for a fact it wasn't, because I reached out to the Bernie campaign along with other politicians before I went forward publicly. No one responded to me.
I saw an interview recently also where Dovere, he was going through some of these allegations, and one of them that I thought was really ridiculous was he was disputing the fact that your mother had called into the Larry King show saying that they couldn't prove that this was your mother, and just the hosts of the show at the time, they kind of were pointing out what a ridiculous accusation that was.
On the Larry King call, I think I don't think there's any question whether or not that was her mother. You know, she kind of flagged that this call.
I mean, we don't know for sure that it was her mother.
I mean, she says it's her mother's voice. Her son says it's her mother's voice. It's from the town where her mother lived. I think that what it doesn't show is that she doesn't talk about a sexual assault in the call. You know, all she says is that my daughter worked for a senator and she had some problems that she complained about. She does not. So it doesn't go all the way and corroborate everything that she had claimed, but.
Go all the way and corroborate what she claims, and it also we're taking what may be her mother. We don't know, but we're taking what could also be a coincidence. It could be some other senator who was having problems with the daughter of one of Larry King's listeners, and the only way that we are saying that it's her mother is because of those coincidences and because it's Tara Reade who said it. But again, Tara Reade has a history of saying things related to this accusation and related to other things that aren't true.
Right, so it's not the only thing. It's not the only thing we're taking. We're also
California. She was calling from California in the exact time period.
Right, we're not idiots. Like, it's 1993. She claims, look, my mother called the Larry King show, and she generally said this. She was living in San Luis Obispo at this time.
We don't have anything to say it.
Right. Okay. So then another mother living in San Luis Obispo at the exact same time. Like, can you imagine the infinitesimal chance that could possibly be a coincidence, and then look at it from Tara Reade's perspective and say, my God, even this is being called into question? Like, at least acknowledge that all the facts line up, that this was my mother.
No, I think that what you see is that there is a lot to suggest that it is her, but we do not know definitively. And I think when you look at Tara Reade's story that has changed multiple times about what happened with that incident, and when you look at other things that have happened in her life, we have to take seriously that she can't be seen as a verified source on things that she's claiming related to this.
Just what are your thoughts on the claim that he's skeptical of that?
Yeah, I was really grateful regarding that story being found, but that my mom called in. That tape from Larry King was actually found by a grad student. CNN kind of archived it and hid it in a way, and then when reporters would try to get it, they wanted several $100s to release it, etc. But yeah, that was ridiculous. Ryan Grimm was actually hosting. I think he was subbing in on Rising. I saw that recently and watched that, and Ryan Grimm pointed out a couple things, but I think what he missed, probably because he didn't know, he had not known that other reporters too, had called. Larry King was still alive when this came out, right? This is right before he died. And he verified that even if you're an anonymous caller, you have to give your name. So somebody took her name, so that was verified that way. Plus, I know my mother's voice, you know, and sadly, she died. Yeah.
Are there any recordings of your mother that you could use to verify that was her voice?
Probably, yeah. I have videotapes and stuff. Yeah, I could probably do that. That's a good idea. I could actually do that. She was so nervous in it. I remember that too. And I just remember her voice very distinctly, and that hearing it again was so nice because she died of throat cancer. So it's the first time I got to hear her voice in some years, and that was nice to hear. But Dovere, yeah, that was my mother. It was verified by several reporters, and it was in the small town of San Luis Obispo, California, so the odds were even less. And Ryan Grimm did point that out to Dovere. But I think he was just desperate, just looking for anything that would validate my story or lend me credibility. He wanted to pull the platform out.
And something else that Ryan Grimm disputed with him a little bit about was, it seemed as though Dovere was making the accusation that Ryan Grimm had done something unseemly to work on your story. And there was an exchange there where Dovere was saying, you know, I chose my words very carefully for a reason.
You also imply in the book I think you say an Intercept reporter, referring to me, was given an exclusive. What do you mean by given an exclusive? It seemed like you were trying to suggest, without saying it, that the Bernie Sanders campaign had given that exclusive. Was that just a kind of a sloppy use of the passive phrase there, or were you trying to suggest that the Sanders campaign had given me an exclusive on this story?
Well, if I had meant to suggest that the Sanders campaign had given you an exclusive on it, then that's what I would have written. The words that are there are what I wrote.
So who were you saying gave me an exclusive then on the...
And the words that are there were chosen carefully, and they're gone through several rounds of editing and vetting, and we're going to stand by the way that it's there.
Okay, but it doesn't really say anything. So it just says that I was given an exclusive, but doesn't say by whom or for what reason.
You're asking me to add words to what is obviously a very sensitive situation there, and I am in a position where I have written very clearly about what I could, and where there are words that needed to be left out to avoid getting into questions of sourcing and questions of legal issues, then that's the way that it is.
And I just wonder, based on what he's said about you and the accusations that he's made about you and the way that he's targeted you online, have you ever considered any legal action against him specifically, or just against anyone in the media who's really just treated you disrespectfully and libelously over the last year?
Politico, that headline that is always at the top of Google, like saying I'm a manipulative lying user. That was the headline of the article. They used two randoms, one random person and a landlord, to say I was a terrible person, that, and basically trash me. It was awful. As far as Dovere goes, he was careful the way he couched his language, I think legally, but obviously calling me a Russian asset and some of the things that are online, yes. I mean, I'm looking at it. The other thing I looked at that was pretty major was the New York Times first article printed my social security number, as you know. I think I told you that, which is still having huge ramifications in my life, by the way. Yeah. So
have they ever apologized about that, or
no,
provide any kind of credit protection or anything?
My attorney sent them a letter, and they basically replied saying, well, she didn't seem that upset about it at the time. She was calm. And I'm like, how my emotional state was when I spoke with you, I was being rational and calm. This doesn't mean I wasn't very, very upset. It just, I don't know, it was odd. That was the response. So no, they haven't done anything to, they just admitted that it was a mistake, but they said it was accidental. So, but it did its damage. Like Dovere. I mean, Dovere's constant attack. And what's interesting to me is his connection to Biden, which I want looked at, because I know he did Oppo for Democrats, Oppo research, opposition research. But he was the first person to ask Joe Biden a softball question, remember? I think there's a video, and then he sort of got attacked on Twitter for how ridiculously softball that question was. So I'm wondering, that's just, that connection is just so tight. Obviously Dovere to me represents Biden's pit bull.